someone for today, then start with me.
Almost done. Wait, what are you guys doing here? Oh shoot, the video. That's better. Sorry, I was in the middle of making another episode for my Pixar series, but I'm here now, so let's get stuck into it. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is a coming-of-age adventure novel that takes place during the pre-Civil War period, written by Mark Twain and published in the year 1884. Just for context on the man himself before going any further, Mark Twain was born Samuel Langhorne Clemens in Florida, Missouri on November 30th, 1835. A prolific writer and humorist, he came from a poor family that only got poorer after his father died. He was set to work at age 13, first as a newspaper apprentice, then a steamboat driver, which is where it's believed he derived the name Mark Twain from. After traveling the world, Twain married a woman named Olivia Langdon during the 1870s, where he continued to write and give lectures all around the country. When his first book, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, was first published, it was beloved by many, and Twain considered it a hymn to childhood. This book also included the character Huckleberry Finn, whom Twain would write about next. He initially conceived this work as a sequel to Tom Sawyer, but later decided to take the story in a different direction. After 8 years, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn was published, and unlike Tom Sawyer, it was not as seen as positively. The book was panned by so many people who didn't approve of the characters or its subject matters regarding religion and slavery, as well as its use of racial slurs and its portrayal of African American characters. But it has still remained a significant work in American literature. In addition to these classics, Twain wrote many more novels until his unfortunate death on April 21st, 1910. Since The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn has been published, there have been a number of film adaptations. Ones that I'm not going to go through in this video because apparently they are all doo-doo.
Gross! I just stepped in a pile of doo-doo.
One of these movies doesn't even include Jim or has any topic of slavery at all. The many inaccuracies and retellings of the story from these different movies are the reason why I'm not going to be discussing them. I'm mainly focusing on the actual book itself. So let's get started. The language of this book is something that I found to be very weird at first. It was certainly a new thing for me when we started reading, but now that some time has passed, I've grown to kind of like the accents, the subtle humor, and the odd vocabulary, since I knew this was all the point of how Twain decided to tell this story. His use of language in Huckleberry Finn is one of the most attractive parts in the novel, in my opinion. Early observers argue against this weird dialect that appears throughout most of the book, but other more visionary readers seem to feel more comfortable with this style of storytelling. Whether intentionally or not, Twain adds this to the book to make the characters look and sound realistic. Twain is able to illustrate the badness of slavery by the use of his language, and expand upon it as the book continues. The language of this book is full of expressions and metaphors and similes and so on and so forth. This makes the novel a lot more interesting to me. Each of these little dialects makes it fun, not just because it works within the context of the story, but also because when they pop up, you're asking yourself, what the heck does that mean? Or, what are they talking about when he says this or that? Another example of the book's language is its usage of the N-word. Twain's use of the word is to reveal frightening realities for both whites and blacks. He exposes that every single person in society is imprisoned by this slur. 19th century whites used this for basically dehumanizing black people, and it was a part of a black person's name depending on who was part of the story. Example. The repeated use of the N-word was meant to drill home the problem with race in society, and how whites were trying to create a negative divide, saying that blacks were less human. Black people were a significant target of all kinds of mistreatment by a blind American society who had no mercy to treat them as an equal. And indeed, the N-word pops up often enough, leaving many readers to think about the implications of its usage. Speaking of the N-word and slavery, why don't we talk about that character now? Jim might be one of my favorite characters from the book. He is technically a minor character because the main plot doesn't really revolve around him that much, but he is still a crucial character to Huck's development and to demonstrate how corrupt society was back then. In the beginning of the novel, Jim is depicted as simple and trusting, and these qualities are thankfully not changed in any sort of way, but are instead fleshed out and proved to be positives instead of negatives. Jim's simple nature becomes common sense, and he constantly chooses the right path for him and Huck to follow. These moments are what establish Jim as an authority figure, and readers recognize his experience and intelligence. I would have to say Jim's most important quality is his sort of gullible nature. As the novel progresses, this nature reveals itself as complete faith and trust in his companions. Another trait that doesn't change throughout the novel, and one that I love the most, is Jim's love for Huck, which extends from being a simple friendship to a full-on relationship of parent and child. When Huck and Jim come across a dead man on the floating house, Jim warns Huck not to look at the man's face. The gesture is kind, but when you soon learn that the dead man was actually Huck's father, you realize the affection Jim has for Huck. Another thing that I love about Jim is that he's willing to sacrifice his life for his friends. There are countless opportunities for Jim to leave Huck during the journey, yet he remains by his side the whole way. His freedom is not worth the price of Huck's life, and readers are constantly reminded that Jim would readily risk his own life to aid anyone in need. When Jim has the chance to be free at the end of the novel, he stays by Tom Sawyer's side, another example of his loyalty. Jim's logic, compassion, intelligence, and above all, his loyalty toward Huck establish him as a heroic figure. Over the course of the book, Jim has a huge effect on Huck as well as the readers. He starts off superstitious, but is fleshed out a lot more, to the point where the readers can view him as intelligent, freedom-loving, and nobly selfless. Now, I know what you're thinking at this point. Yeah, Josh, all this stuff is cool and all, but I came to this video to know about Huck. Why haven't you talked about him yet, you dope? First off, don't call me a dope. And second,
I thought you'd never ask.
As you may have guessed, I have been saving the best for last. I think Huck's journey throughout the story is the best, most entertaining, and most interesting aspect of the book. It's his approach to his surroundings and his inner struggles that make him one of the most important and recognizable figures in American literature. From the beginning of the novel, Twain makes it clear that Huck is a boy who comes from the lowest levels of white society. His father is a drunk who disappears for months on end. Huck himself is dirty and frequently homeless. Although the widow Douglas attempts to reform Huck, he resists her attempts and maintains his independent ways. The community has failed to protect him from his father, and though the widow finally gives Huck some of the schooling and training that he had missed, that didn't mean he had forgotten social values in the same way a middle-class boy like Tom Sawyer had. Because Huck is a child, the world is new to him, but as a coming-of-age character in the late 19th century, he views his surroundings in a logical sense. He observes his environment and gives realistic descriptions of the Mississippi River and the culture to be found within it. Huck's practical and often socially naive views and perceptions provide a lot of satirical humor in the novel, like I said earlier. Huck simply reports what he sees, and his narration allows Twain to depict a realistic view of ignorance and inhumanity. And because of his background, he does more than just apply the rules that he has been taught. He creates his own rules. Just like some of the other characters in the book, Huck has the ability to adapt to almost any situation through deceit. This is how he's able to survive the abuse of Pap, the violence of a feud, and the wiles of Rivercon men. To persevere in these situations, Huck lies, cheats, steals, and defrauds his way down the river. These traits are part of the reason why Huck Finn was viewed as a book not acceptable for children, but they are still traits that allow Huck to survive his surroundings, and, in the conclusion, make the right decision. Because Huck believes that the laws of society are just, he condemns himself as a bit of a traitor for acting against them and aiding Jim. More importantly, he believes that he'll lose his chance at Providence by helping out a slave. So when Huck declares the biggest and most iconic quote of the book, "Alright then, I'll go to hell," he refuses his place in society. And the amount of emotion of his decision is what solidifies his role as a heroic figure. Huck is not some kind of independent moral genius, don't get me wrong. He still struggles with understanding the world, especially when it involves some of the preconceptions about Black Americans. But these failures are a part of what makes Huck an appealing and sympathetic character. He is only a boy after all. As imperfect as he is, Huck represents what anyone is capable of becoming. A smart, strong, and confident human. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is more than just a funny adventure. It's a journey of morality, development, and understanding American society. For better or worse, it still remains a classic piece of literature with a consistent tone, fun characters, and a simple story that's dark, hilarious, and thought-provoking. It might not be something for everyone, but if you don't have any idea what it is or what it's about, I recommend giving it a chance and reading it for yourself. I know this isn't a movie review, but if I were to rate this book, I'd give it like an 8 out of 10. Seek it out. It's fun.